The answer is no to microtransactions. If I'm not enjoying it, then something's wrong. And I'd really been not enjoying how we were making video games. I really feel like if there's one game that we should try a better way, it's this game.
Hello everybody and welcome. I'm happy to present to you my so far second interview with Dean Hall, CEO of Rocketwerkz, the game studio developing Kitten Space Agency. Before we start, I would like to provide a few points of clarification. First, there was an issue during audio recording resulting in lower quality audio than I would usually like to have. I'm still not sure what caused this because I checked the input levels multiple times and they were fine. So something must have happened during processing by the recording software, in this case OBS. Second, there are going to be a couple of names being mentioned during the video which aren't explained during the interview. Felipe, meaning the creator of Kerbal space program, better known as Harvester. Jamie, who was one of the main developers on KSP and later KSP2, known by his handle JPL Repo. Blackrak, the creator of the volumetric clouds mod for KSP, who later joined the KSP2 team and is now working his magic on KSA. Third, the video was recorded a couple of days before my 1 year later recap of KSA development was published and done under the assumption that there might be a public build of the game available already until this video comes out. But as we just learned a couple of hours before I recorded this intro, that has been delayed to the week of November 10, November 11. And if you enjoy my KSA development update content, make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss any news. For instance, when the public build is going live. Okay, now to what you've been waiting for, the interview. Dean Hall, thanks again for taking your time to speak with me and talk about all things KSA. It's now 1 year since you have announced the project to the world. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about what kind of were the biggest challenges for you and the team for the past 12 months bringing this to life?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest challenge was deciding to do it at the start. So we'd actually long wanted to make a project like this, and actually not long before Kerbal Space Program 2 got cancelled, we had looked into making a game. It was codenamed Orbit, and we shelved it because we felt that it wouldn't really work. So that first decision to actually start doing KSA involved us doing a lot of technical groundwork. So we went in while we were actually talking to a bunch of people who were working on KSP2, like Jamie and that, we actually asked them a lot of questions there about directions we were taking, things that we thought were the most difficult parts, and then we just wanted to answer those before we committed to full production. So that was probably the hardest part, because that really required the studio getting to a point where we were going to commit and we were going to hire a lot of people, and it was spending a lot of money up front. That was probably the biggest one. And the second one was probably, I guess, going loud with that and trying to do that in maybe quite an unusual way of kind of just posting on Reddit and then talking with people like yourself. Those were really the two biggest hurdles, I think. Yeah, for sure. Just getting started.
When this interview comes out, there's potentially a public build available. But before that, a lot of months have gone by that you had the game in an industry pre-alpha, which I was lucky enough to be part of. So how was that feedback process going? Especially interests me is what the industry feedback has been from other rocket companies and science people and stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I have to be coy for a little bit to people, little parts of it, mostly because it's been sort of insane how many people have reached out. Almost as a joke, I included a section in the Discord post saying, hey, if you're part of a space agency or a space company and you haven't received access to the build, let me know. And my email got flooded with people from amazing organizations. Some of them would adorably start explaining what their science organization was, and I'd be like, yeah, I know, everybody knows what that science organization is. But I think what really struck me was just how many people are out there doing these amazing jobs in science, and many of them got inspired by playing games like Kerbal Space Program. And that really sort of underscored for me the importance of this whole idea that, games can inspire and inspiration should be free. And I know that's been something that a lot of people have struggled with the approach we want to do with KSA, but that just really started to underscore it for me when I saw what people had said. And then a lot of practical feedback, about decisions we've made about how to approach things. Feedback in some cases for some space companies that our visualization tools are really good and that maybe their companies will actually use our visualization stuff for their mission control and stuff like that, because they could just feed the telemetry data in. It's kind of amazing to just think about how many people have been part of that Kerbal Space Program journey, or that their time with Kerbal Space Program even factored into them getting their jobs and getting inspired to be part of science. The feedback that I think sort of hit me the most was that kind of feedback, just how many people are really passionate and concerned in a good way that something can pick up that torch and walk forward.
And was there something in particular during that feedback process where you guys realized, oh, we went somewhere the wrong way, or there was something that we completely missed that we now really have to put into the game based on all of that professional feedback you got?
Yeah, look, a lot of it can get quite technical and specific. So, whenever you're working with scientists and engineers, you get very specific feedback on things, which is fantastic. Probably the one that most comes up is Linux support, which we don't directly have at the moment. That's one that gets brought up quite a lot, and the nicest way, I might add. So, a lot of people booting it up, but I think that's probably one that does come up quite a lot, and it's probably a surprise to nobody who's watching this video. They're like, yeah, of course that's going to be a thing.
I have to say, I am so fed up with all products by Microsoft at the moment, and that I'm already planning on switching to Linux full-time in not the too far future.
And look, in a lot of cases, it's for us as a game dev, it's really just a question of money and budget, and also time budget as well. So if you take KSA, for example, we're not doing anything deliberately that would get in the way of us releasing on Linux and even Mac OS in the future. So the enterprise team, which is the team who work on the technology, Brutal, a couple of them work on Mac or Linux. And so we don't like to do things that get in the way, but that it's not as simple as compiling the game and those and then releasing them. You also have to make sure the controls are configured for it, and then that's part of the build process to actually deploy it as well. So that's kind of why there's no Linux build at the moment. It will really come down to how much funds we end up raising, and dedicating an engineer to it, and then having it as part of a regular build pipeline.
You already mentioned the getting the funds needed. You raised a lot of eyebrows when you decided to take KSA the free route. And before we go into the contributions model, I want to ask you something very specific. It's going to be a yes or no question, because a lot of people have the belief if a game is for free, then it will have to come with microtransactions down the line or some other ad integrations or scammy stuff. What do you say to that? Will microtransactions or anything of the like come into KSA?
No. I think the path for KSA, if it wasn't on a contributions model, would be similar to the path we took with Stationeers and Icarus, where it would be a paid game and then with supporters DLC. That's not an approach I like. It's not something that we've necessarily liked doing at the studio, and it's a lot of work that's away from the core. And it's a lot of trying to figure out, okay, we've got to give all this stuff away for free, all the good stuff, and then at the same time try and educate people. So sign up here. So yeah, the answer is no to microtransactions. I just see them as a distraction. At worst, I can live with Supporters Edition DLC, with the main features being given away for free, which is what we do in our other games.
now that we have got that out of the way, you said you want to finance KSA mainly by the contribution model you kind of sketched out a little bit over the past few months, but so far we haven't seen or heard any details along that. We know that you've set up this company awoo.com that will help or coordinate all of that. But can you offer us a little bit more details where this is all headed and what people can expect from contributions?
We're trying to figure out how can we really set it up that a game like KSA doesn't suffer the same fate as KSP did, which is just all too common, and especially now. And even in my own studio with Icarus, it was really rough at the start, and there was a time when the studio could have run out of money, and it was essentially an online-only game. So we had to go back in and rip all that out. And now, we're heavily integrated into the Steam API, so we're completely dependent on the Steam API. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's going on. So that we kind of wanted to task a whole separate team and say, okay, go away and start thinking about all this stuff. There's the Stop Killing Games movement going on. There's a lot of people starting to look, I think, at these problems, and we wanted to start looking at some of the solutions to those. And that's, I guess, what the AWU team's been looking at. I find we often keep coming back to keeping it really simple, at least at the start, because there's just a lot of things we don't know. We're not going to be going into a KSA sort of mission launch with all of the answers. And I think that's the power of community-driven development is you don't have to. You can just go and say, hey, these are the things we figured out here. Have a look at them. What do you think? That's a way of saying that we're keeping it pretty simple. It will provide the ability for you to get the download, obviously, and it will provide the ability for you to contribute if you want. At the heart, that's it. We're also trying to iterate on, and this is based on feedback actually, we're trying to iterate on how people get information. As you've pointed out, and many others have, Discord's not smashing on Discord or anything, but it's not perfect, and it certainly doesn't work for a lot of people. The AWU team were actually really keen on saying, hey, we really think you should have forums, but we're also looking to make sure that place that you go to get KSA has good information, very factual information, our blog posts. So we really we found sort of the Discord's not great for our blog posts. So we'll probably do very detailed blog posts there. That's the big thing.
You mentioned KSA should be a so-called forever game. So have you already thought about, okay, some kind of guide for people to pick up where you left off should Rocketwerkz ever go out of business? I certainly hope not it will, but just in case. Have you thought about that?
Starting with the company, I often think my contributions to things are overblown. Sometimes I feel like my contribution is more like the Kool-Aid man, where I just sort of burst into a room and say, it's ready to go, everybody, and then leave. But so I think a lot of that is about establishing the right culture and the team. And actually that's probably been one of the most rewarding parts of KSA so far, is just booting it up and going, wow. I might have said, we should really do this thing. And then to see people actually build it and then go even so much further. Probably the biggest technical innovation is that spherical billboarding. And then to really see what Lynx and some of the brutal engineers have run with it, and BlackRack as well, it's just really kind of incredible in the true sense of the word. It's just absolutely incredible where they've gone to with it. So I'd sort of submit that in evidence of, I think the project would be just fine without me.
Removing yourself from the equation, let's talk about Rocketwerkz as a company, or the team as an entity. Should it ever come to an end, is there like a way to preserve the KSA essence or the information or the code base, should that ever come to pass?
There's practical mechanisms that you can do that are already there. So if New Zealand just got deleted by a space laser, well, no one would have to update their maps because we're not on a whole bunch of maps. But the code exists on external servers and on external people's computers, like BlackRack, who is not in New Zealand. So the code would be just fine and would be there. in a technical sense, it's already very resilient. From a practical standpoint, though, we are a company, so that puts some complications in it. That will take a lot longer, and that's kind of a longer term thing structurally from a governance perspective that I'm trying to put together as I pull my company through what I think is a very transitional period in video game development. And yeah, that's unfortunately not something that you can do in a day. That takes a bit of time. But I would argue that KSA is a good example of something as part of that transition as to what I'm trying to do, which is to pull the company to be more direct to consumer rather than what it's been traditionally in the past.
Can you maybe explain more of your reasoning why you decide to leave aside Steam and the other stores? You mentioned earlier your dependence in Icarus, like you're now completely technically dependent on Steam. So maybe can you expand on that and then add your reasoning why KSA stays outside of Steam?
It's very funny that people would say something like, "Oh, if you're not on Steam, it's dead. It's not going to work." Because I was around. I was there, Gandalf. When Steam was created, and people said the same things about Steam. And actually, people weren't very happy with Steam when it first came out. And maybe I'm now at that age where I've seen so many of these kind of changes, and people always pushing against them, and something always seems really stupid until suddenly it's not, and then everybody retcons their whole life as to if it was just normal all along. When I look at making video games, which is my life, it's what I do, if I'm not enjoying it, then something's wrong. And I'd really been not enjoying how we were making video games. And when I'd look at customer reaction, a lot of customers weren't enjoying it either. So I'm like, if neither of us are enjoying this process, if we don't like how we're paying for games, if we don't like how we're receiving them, if the features aren't working, the amount of download issues we have with Icarus is insane, then I'm like, then that's not a good model if there's a game that I think is very important, which is what I think of KSA. And I think that there aren't many games that you get to work on in a career that you can talk with scientists and people who work at massive space companies. I mean that's a dream for a video game developer, to work on a game that maybe could inspire some of the people to land on other planets. I mean, that's the holy grail of making video games. It was such an aspirational idea that it really desired sitting down and sort of from the ground up thinking about how should people get this. And I keep coming back to that it should be free. Everyone should be able to play it. I don't think there should be an economic restriction. I just think that KSA deserves better. It deserves us to really sit down and really think as game developers, how should people get this game? How should this game be built? How should the money that comes in, how should we get that? And I really think that, I'm not going out here saying here's the answer. I'm saying I really feel like if there's one game that we should try a better way, it's this game.
But Steam is also capable of hosting free games. So what holds you back from putting KSA for free on Steam and then inside the game have a notification or something to tell people, hey, if you like this, go to our contribution site and help us out?
When you release a game on Steam, you have to agree to a whole bunch of things. You have to agree to things like that you give Steam the ability to provide an unlimited license to people to play the games, and it applies just as much to free games. That's something I fundamentally don't like. I don't like the license to play approach. I think there must be a better way. I also have my own philosophical disagreements with Steam fundamentally around gambling, particularly with young people. It's just something I am just dead against of every form. And I'm just very uncomfortable with continuing to do something that I'm dead against, I suppose. And, right now, as we're talking about this, there's a massive controversy going on with, Counter-Strike skins and stuff like that. And I really feel like that this is going to feel like a dark time in video game history in the future when we look back at people who turned a blind eye to young people getting bought into gambling and stuff like that. What a lot of people don't realize is even if you're releasing a free game on Steam, you do have to agree to Steam's subscriber agreement. Also, there's just a whole bunch of approaches that we want to try that are very different. So we want to start with a green field, and starting with a green field that a massive mall is built around is not starting fresh. It's building a small park in a mall, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff that I think would sit well outside of the Steam subscriber agreement, outside of the Steam ecosystem and API that we want to try in terms of how to deliver this game, that just don't fit with it at all.
When you say even a free game will require you to include the Steam license, there's kind of a movement pushing back against this, oh, you don't own anything anymore, you're just licensing it from us. Like Sony revoking the license to digital copies of videos that you bought. Do I understand you correctly that your thinking goes into the same direction, that you don't like the idea of having a license instead of property that you actually own when you buy a game or even get it for free?
Yeah, I mean, I'd take it further. As someone who works and runs a video game company, there was a time a few years ago I sort of woke up and I'm like, why am I doing this? My company doesn't make money. It's super unpleasant, super difficult. And a lot of customers get very mad, and they get mad at us. Sometimes they get mad at us for Steam bugs, and blame us for it. And so at a certain point, I was like, what is going on? Why are we all mad? I don't think Gabe Newell's mad as he's on his yacht, his super yacht, but I'm certainly mad, and our customers are mad, and they're sad when games go under that are potentially really good games. So I guess I not only am I not happy with this whole, oh, you have a license, you don't own it, but I actually think the problem's a lot deeper. It's kind of like looking at termites having made a few holes in the wall. I think the rot is all through it. So that was kind of why we were like, let's just try something really different. Are we going to get it all right? No, absolutely not. And I think we're going to have to change that pretty substantially as we go along. But that doesn't mean you don't try. Just because something's difficult doesn't mean you don't try a different way. And I would submit as evidence in that is YouTubers, content creators, they have had to, at every step of the way, look at unique and different ways of how to build a community and build a livelihood to push things through. And I think it's about time that video game developers do the same thing.
Speaking of livelihoods, did you notice any significant bump in sales for Icarus or Stationeers ever since you've announced KSA? Did people take more notice of Rocketwerkz games since then?
Very interesting question. So it's a little hard to directly attribute stuff, but we did start to notice, I think, what I would call more and more super fans, which has really been our focus for a long time, which then leads us into this place we're at with KSA now, where we want to be much more direct to consumer. So we really want to find those people who really just get the kind of games we want to make, and really understand how we want to make them, because it is not for everybody. Bizarrely, right after Gamescom, which I would traditionally say is not a great period. Honestly, sales are normally down. We noticed a massive increase in Icarus sales from Germany. Germany suddenly became half of our sales, and we couldn't really attribute it to anything specifically. To give you an example, around April or March this year, we were looking at being down in revenue by about 6 to 7% year on year. And so I was kind of ready for us to be eating into our runway, into the money that we stashed away. In a video game company, it's extremely normal for you to spend only to suddenly make money. So our revenue was down nearly 10% year on year. And that I was pretty set on that was what it was going to be. And in the last probably 4 months, that's completely turned around, and we're now up nearly 30% year on year. So we've nearly made 30% more this year than we did last year. I don't think that's related to Kitten Space Agency. I think at least not significantly. I think it's mostly just through good old-fashioned game development work. And I do think that KSA as a project has helped inspire the rest of the studio to hop behind a direction to say, hey, we care about a lot of stuff, and we're just going to get ourselves sorted together and really rally behind a direction. And I think that's allowed us to produce more focused content and more focused messaging when we talk with people. And I think we've been lucky that that's kind of worked a bit. That's my best guess anyway.
Team for KSA seems to be set up a bit differently than the others for Stationeers and Icarus. A lot more distribution around the world, a lot coming from the modding scene, etc. Can you give us maybe a little bit an insight into how big is the team at the moment? And is it more of in the sense of like actual like waged employees, or more like contractors for timed work? For instance, okay, now we need clouds, now we hire BlackRock for 2 months, then we get him in half a year when we need him again? Or how does this work at the moment?
We don't really at the studio do just, I suppose, traditional contractors. Not normally. It just doesn't really fit with our vibe. So we have a bunch of people who are contractors who we treat as employees. The only reason they're not employees is because of the law doesn't allow someone to be an employee unless they're here. But we treat them, I suppose, culturally as if they're part of us, because they are. So look, there's about 9 people directly full-time on KSA. But I think what a lot of people miss is that what we call our enterprise team, they're, I suppose, agency employees on KSA. So what will happen is when we require some technology or changes, it will be the enterprise team who work on Brutal. They will make the technology we require, and then they will actually deploy on like a tour of duty and work on KSA sometimes for months at a time. So actually right now we have Hannon, who did our entire skinned mesh animation pipeline to deliver us the adorable kitten. Hannon is helping to integrate that directly into KSA. I don't know whether it will be in for our public launch. I suspect probably not for the initial launch, but a build shortly after that, maybe even in the weeks after it, you'll be able to zip around an EVA as a little kitten. So that's a milestone that Hannon's working on. So that's where we have not only the direct Kitten Space Agency team members, but we have the Brutal engineers as well.
You mentioned the kittens already, and ever since the game was announced, there was like this undercurrent that is for some reason completely against kittens. Did that consistent critique of the main characters surprise you, or was this something you guys had accounted for? And or what do you hope people will learn once they can actually see the kittens in the game and play with them? That maybe what could change their mind, do you think?
I hope that the worst thing about Kitten Space Agency for anybody is the kittens. That's my dream. We've done our job properly if the biggest criticism people have is that we're using kittens. It certainly doesn't surprise me, because kittens were not our preferred choice by a mile. And in fact, we went through so many different options, including, hey, we should do humans and stuff like that. We went through an enormous amount of options. Kittens was the only one that was not objectionable, that met all our technical and content requirements. We'd still be debating it now if we didn't just say, look, we've got to pick something, let's just go with the kittens. And really, it was a technical choice in the end. Yeah.
We already mentioned KSP a lot, and I think either it was when we spoke or in another interview or in a town hall, you said the first goal for gameplay is like do KSP and then go from there. Did you already have time to figure out the go from there stuff? Because the question is, why would people pick KSA over KSP if the gameplay is kind of the same? So what do you guys have in store or are thinking about to differentiate you from the original or build upon it?
We'll see that process develop as we go forward. I think what we've focused intensely on is the foundations, and we're just starting to push outside the foundations now. So I would argue that that first pillar that we identified, which was seamlessness, I think you can see that now inside the game, the ability to jump between vessels at just the tap of a key, the ability to go to any planet anywhere instantly, the ability to have multiple windows showing and those kinds of things. Those demonstrate the value that can be gained from rebuilding on the foundations, but not reinventing everything all at once. So you'll see us in some cases, we'll be like, okay, let's use all this new technology to do what we had before. That doesn't mean we have to keep that, but that lets us test it out. Does it work? Is it working? Yes, it's working. Okay, cool. Now we can start playing with it and being a bit weird about how we approach it. And it's hard on the team because often on the team, people will want to go out and be like, let's just rethink this completely. And it's like, okay, step one, we've made this new technological approach. Let's model what was there before. How does that feel? Does it all work? Yes. Okay. Now let's see how can we extend it.
You mentioned pillars. The first pillar was seamlessness. I think the second was wonder. There must be more. You can't build a house only on 2 columns, right?
We've found pillars and principles are a useful tool to help us structure a game because it's almost like a scaffold. So for us, pillars are things that must be true. And we don't phrase them as a word. We typically have them as a whole phrase. So, with Icarus, we'd say the game must scale really well. Actually, I think it's one we didn't super deliver on. But typically, I would say that if you don't deliver on a pillar, you're really risking project failure. So those are statements that anyone working on the project should be able to rely on being true. That to us is what a pillar is. If we wanted to take wonder, we would say, the game invokes a sense of wonder, or the game allows you to seamlessly jump around. So we try and phrase it as a phrase so it gets at people in people's heads. So they're like, oh, I know this to be true, so I can go off and do my work. But they're very, pillars are very sort of open-ended. Then we also rely on what we call principles. And those are statements that should be true, but they might not be. They might be, maybe you could go outside it because it would be cooler. So with Icarus, we had one that was essentially that whenever you saw something from a human, it should have been placed there by another human. And we ended up breaking that by adding NPCs in later on. So I think that to us demonstrates the difference between pillars and principles. Pillars, we tend to have about 5 of them. Principles will have more than a dozen. So things that must be true, things that should be true. The only 2 confirmed pillars we have so far is wonder and seamlessness. The reason being is because we have to agree those on a team. I think that the reason that we haven't nailed down the other ones 100% yet is because we're only just finished the beginning. We've just finished establishing that core foundation architecture. And I think that's what the cool thing is about playing the current KSA build. It's not a game yet, but it's also not a tech demo. It's way beyond that. There's a clear scaffold there that you can see things clipping into place. And every now and then I get this little moment where I'm supposed to be testing it and I get distracted with a moon landing. And it feels like that's getting some momentum to it. I would say we're 90% there in terms of agreeing that you should have an emotional attachment to the kittens. The structure we're going to use around that phrase, I think, is where we're sort of debating. Is it you get an emotional attachment to the kittens, or do the kittens give you a sense of progression? We still haven't decided which side of that coin to sit on, but we've definitely, we're heading towards that idea that the kittens are supposed to be important. You're supposed to care a lot about the kittens. Another pillar will be around your agency. So I don't just mean agency and what you get to do, but and you running a space agency. There's a mod for KSP that adds a whole bunch more options for how you control your space agency. So you pick your sort of focus. Your focus is like a moon landing. Moon landing. So now you get benefits towards that. I'm not saying we'll just take that mod. I'm saying I really liked what that did because it starts to provide you this guided experience for how your space agency grows. So I guess I'm thinking about progression from not just your kittens. How can your little astronauts or catastrophenauts, I don't know what we're calling them, how are they growing and changing? and getting more powerful for you and growing through your space program. Are they an astronaut for a while and they move into your mission control and provide you some bonuses there? But also your agency yourself. How do you get nudged through the content? And I think that's really important. Some people love just playing purely open-ended, but I also think for some people, they like a bit of structure. They like to be nudged in a direction. I know I'm being very vague compared to having these other words, but it's because we haven't quite nailed down exactly what does success look like us with those phrases.
I don't want to influence you guys too much, but one of the things that really pulled me into KSP was that basically unlimited creativity. You can go in there and build a 6,000 part replica of the Titanic. You can go in there and build a 3-part rocket and just have fun with it. The only limitations were technical in nature and not by game design. And Felipe, if you're listening, thank you. And I really hope that this will also be a very integral part of KSA, because I think the day that you guys release the vehicle editor part of KSA, I'm going to be very much hooked to that for days, weeks, and months probably. So yeah, maybe take this
as an example,
unlimited creativity pillar. So to speak.
Yeah, so I agree with that so much that we don't just have a vehicle editor, we have a part editor as well. So, one of the pillars I want to look at is agency. That's agency is the separate use of the word, which is your ability to influence and control stuff directly. I'll give a couple of examples. One of them is I've been looking at how you can set up launch sites where you want. But also, if you think about part editing, that serves both a gameplay and a technical benefit. Already our parts are made up of subparts, and the idea is to make that available as an optional mode in the game for a player. At any time they can click it and say, actually, I'd like to come up with my own part configuration. There's a massive lesson in KSP that I bring to all our games we do, and actually there's a lot of games that I feel make this mistake. I think you can be unreasonably restrictive with collision in a game, and I think it's something that KSP does beautifully, maybe by accident. Actually, I'll ask Felipe. I'm pretty sure he'll tell me that he just couldn't figure out how to get it done, and we just got this happy accident. But the fact that that it's very non-restrictive with you moving stuff around, you can move stuff anywhere. And I think if you look at how players build stuff with, they follow their own internal guidance as to what should happen, and I think that's fantastic. That's totally acceptable, and in fact I think that's good, because you've got this player in their head building their own narrative, their own guidelines around how they should build parts and how things work. I think the minute you stop that, each time you stop that, you got to be really sure if you're going to be stopping the player from doing something as they're placing a part because of collision or something. You better be really sure that you want to do that, because it really restricts the ability for people to do these amazing and incredible things.
When do you guys plan on having us players have an actual vehicle editor to throw together those prefabbed parts? When do you think that people like myself can start slapping those together and have some fun with that?
There is already the initial structure of a vehicle editor in there. As you found yourself, it's really purely designed to test the rendering at the moment and some of the initial user action stuff. A lot of this is out of simplicity. We try and walk straight towards the target initially. So you'll see a lot of work on that rapidly, I think, as we go forward. I would say, so by the time this video comes out, we will have demoted the Apollo CSM that was just bought off asset store to just throw into the game, will be demoted, and the primary vehicle that you'll get will be our version of Gemini, which is made by Daishi, which is entirely part and subpart driven. So that will be the primary vehicle when you open the game. That'll be the one that pops up.
We saw the Apollo CSM in KSA, we saw Gemini recreation. And I also get the feeling that the current UI of KSA is also very reminiscent of old flight computers. So where do you think the game is going to be headed? More like celebrating the past or looking to the future, or where do you want to end up here?
I think it's sort of neither of those. I think what we want is that sense of progression as much as possible. The only reason that the UI looks like it does is because that was the hardest one to do. So, you know, making a computer GUI is, you know, like a MFD or something. It's not. I'm not saying it's necessarily easy, but it's a lot harder to make a computer render something that looks mechanical. It would be really good, and what we'd like to do is have it fairly componentized. So the gauging and stuff that you see is based on parts and subparts inside your various devices. We may even get to the point where your cockpit is actually a subpart as well. So you're going to be able to, if you wanted, build your own cockpits inside the game yourself, because the individual elements inside the cockpit are just subparts. So then if you take that to its logical conclusion, we want that you to have a sense of progression. My last Kerbal playthrough lasted 5 years of real human time. I have a little log that I keep. I write like a mission report for each one. I don't want to explain it too much because I sound like I have some sort of problem, but you know, I take it very seriously. It's something I you know, I'm very much into and stuff like that. So yeah, I like a sense of progression there, and I think as much as possible we want to model that. But I do need to stress that's not something we have done yet. Although Daishi, if you look at the new Gemini that we have now, which is built out of parts, and actually he produced some awesome renders that he posted in dev updates that shows that he is already thinking about how do we build a cockpit in there, and then flowing on, how do we build that in such a way that the players can move around and replace bits and things like that.
Doing your own cockpit sounds exactly like something that I think people like Scott Manley or Felipe himself would love to do, because I've seen their setups and it looks like a battle station. Oh, you have one yourself.
Actually, I have one in that cupboard there. I have a whole bunch of the SciTech stuff in the cupboard. And actually out there I have a thing in a box. I haven't had it set up, but I would add though, I think it's important because I bet you right now there'll be a bunch of people, but they're probably already written in the comments down here, that approachability. And so a lot of people, and this came up on the team, there was a real spicy argument around a whiteboard when we were sketching this out, is that this goes against approachability. And I think that can absolutely be true, but that's why instead the game is built heavily around these prefabricated components and prefabricated elements within an optional. You want to go in and say, actually, I'd like to go through. I'm a player who wants to go through. So it's a door that it's a two-way door that you can open or close to say, actually, I'd like to go in. Here's this part here that's a cockpit. And I think it's about having off ramps. And a lot of the game is like that. And I have seen people legitimately saying, this just all seems too complicated. But that's because we have to, it's a lot easier for us to start at the complicated end. This is something that we've confirmed many times over with Felipe, is that starting with the most complicated version of something in KSA, KSP, is the much better way to go. So we're starting with the hardest version of something, which is why we started with the real world solar system. Because it was always going to be the most difficult to deliver. We can actually go and test, you know, I put in interstellar interlopers that have been detected hopping through the system. So we put those in there to see, hey, you know, does it respond as the science is telling us? So yeah, I just wanted to just underscore that. Totally get the approachability thing. So it's about having off ramps for people, and often putting these sort of options that like click through options to say, hey, I would like to go into advanced mode now, and I would actually really like to redesign this cockpit myself.
We see a lot of updates currently. There's like 3 builds at least every week that have been released. Do you expect to keep up that cadence going forward, or will things slow down a little bit the more complicated implementations are going to get, or the more content is added?
One of the really good things is that by being free of Steam, by being free of Unity and Unreal, we really get to rethink everything. And often we can short circuit a massive amount of legacy bloat. Look, animations would be the best one. When I was sitting down looking at Hannon's in-engine work on the Kitten animations, I was really just blown away by how straightforward it was and the level of quality we were able to achieve with the animation system and the performance. And he explained to me engines like Unreal and Unity, they have to support legacy systems, whereas we just went straight with, hey, let's go read the SIGGRAPH papers. Let's go look at what universities are saying right now about how we should approach some of these things in the future. And we could just straight out implement them. We've been able to do the same thing with our build processes. You would have seen that there's a little pop-up that shows the changelog in game. There's a little notification that the game's updated. These are all just little things that we've spent a little bit of time on. I think we're going to iterate on that tremendously going forward with a view of what best suits the game as a forever game. Yeah, so I think the cadence will be roughly similar. We don't like to deploy more than a build a day. Builds are deployed manually at the moment by me. I usually wait until something really important comes up. It's a lot easier for us to follow the process that we naturally like with this system than even with Steam. I think people don't realize, because most people have just a totally fine time. We have had enormous problems with Icarus on Steam. We can't physically push more than an update once a week because of how Steam applies updates. They make a whole copy of the game. They just sort of pick a hard disk to do that on, and then they download everything and apply it again to it and then copy it back. And for some people with their computer setups, this causes corruption. But Steam only keeps a manifest file once the file is successfully copied. And what we found is a number of customers end up with a bricked installation that they have to manually delete, which I've been reporting to Steam now for about 3 years. Additionally, we had a problem where people would buy DLC and it wouldn't work. And some of these people got extremely angry at us, and we tried to explain it's a Steam issue, and I reported it to Steam so many times that they told me that I was not allowed to report it anymore. They told me it wasn't a bug, and then you can go Google it. Actually, there's a news article that says that Valve finally fixed this bug that they told me for a long time didn't exist. So we lost probably, I would say, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue on that. I only bring this up because I know that many people have good experiences, but these things really hurt us. They hurt us in reviews. They hurt us technically, but people applied those problems to us when we had no agency over the solution. So we were kind of at a point where actually I'd rather have agency over the. If there's going to be a problem and we're going to get blamed for it, I would rather it be something we controlled.
You mentioned a few specific amounts of money. Can you tell us maybe what amount of donations or contributions you would want KSA to generate roughly per year to keep the project afloat for many years to come?
I've been selling a whole bunch of my own assets and stuff like that to put into this vision. That's how important it is for me. I think kind of a single dollar donation indicates a data point, right? Or in fact, no donation at all. If there wasn't a single dollar come in, that's a data point. At this point, it's like the first time you're launching a new kind of rocket, right? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what success even looks like. You probably only know what failure looks like. So anything that's not failure is success in that regard. And I think really that success will come from developing a relationship with the community that's healthy, that involves healthy criticism and critique. You've seen some pretty spicy discussion in the veterans channel on KSA and spicy discussion in the general. All we usually ask is, that's our workspace. So we ask people, hey, it's our workers in there. Be respectful of that. But so look, I really don't have a picture. I think it's going to be very difficult to fund the project entirely off that. I don't think that's realistic. I think it will be me paying for most of this, but it would be very nice if it works. I think if we do find a way that is not like this whole DLC and microtransaction hellscape that we're all in now, I'll be super happy. Like, that will be amazing. And maybe it won't be able to work for every game that exists, but if it could work for some games that are really important, then that would be amazing. So I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't see that as a bad thing. I think we should be trying to do something else. If people don't try other things, then we're stuck with the things we have.
Well, in that case, I think the only thing that I can add to that is good luck on that model, and we'll see what the trajectory of that launch gets you. Thank you very much for your time and being so open with answering my questions. And yeah, best of luck to you and the team, and continuing working on KSA.
Awesome. We'll talk soon.
How soon are Dean and I going to talk again? I don't know, but since he remains very approachable and there are no corporate watchdogs holding him back, we're going to stay in touch like we did after our first interview almost a year ago. You can watch that back by clicking the link up here and in the description. If you enjoy this and in general like what I do, maybe consider supporting my channel over on Patreon. For a small monthly fee, you can watch all my videos ad-free, and on the higher tiers you can get early access to content. Also, your name will show up here, together with all of these wonderful people. Thanks as always for your ongoing support. And yes, I totally understand that a monthly commitment is a lot to ask in the current economy. There's also the option to unlock videos on Patreon with a one-time payment, usually $3. And there is the super thanks button here on YouTube if you think one of my videos deserves special praise. But mostly I'm just glad I'm able to share the things I learned about Kitten Space Agency with all of you, and I look forward to seeing you up there in space.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.